I wasn't the kind of employee anyone paid attention to. Quiet, precise, predictable. The guy who remembered passwords, deadlines, vendor IDs, and where the missing invoice from last quarter actually went. And that's exactly why I noticed what no one else did. It started with a vendor we hadn't used in almost 2 years. Carter and Fields Logistics. They were a small freight service we dropped after the contract restructuring. Their account should have been dormant, archived, untouched. But 5 weeks ago, a refund appeared under their ID. 6 $6 then 2 more. 427, 318s. Nothing dramatic, nothing that made alarms ring, but all of them were labeled vendor overpayment reconciliation, a category we never used unless something went seriously wrong, and nothing had gone wrong. By the end of the week, there were 12 transactions. By the end of the month, 92. Every single one approved by one login. Akoli, Yalduk1. My boss, Andrew Cole, Director of Finance. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't even want to consider it. Payroll errors happen, system bugs happen, but 92 transactions that added up to 920 for 38.77. That doesn't happen. I didn't report it immediately, not because I doubted the numbers, because I didn't want to destroy a man's career over my suspicion alone. I spent 3 days checking logs, statements, timestamps, vendor histories. I even stayed late on a Friday just to pull archived audit trails. The pattern was clean, too clean. Every transaction processed between 11:46 p.m. and 5:52 a.m. Hours Andrew never worked. He was a 9 to 4 guy, the kind who complained when meetings ran past lunch. But his login never slept. That's what scared me. If it wasn't him, someone was using his credentials, and if it was him, then I was sitting on nearly $1 million worth of fraud tied to a man who played golf with the CEO twice a month. I printed everything, organized it, and walked into his office at 4:12 p.m. on a Thursday. He didn't look up. He stayed on his phone, scrolling, smirking at something on the screen. "What's up, Mark?" he said without moving his eyes. "Make it quick. I've got a thing at 5. "I found a discrepancy in vendor payouts," I told him, "about $900,000. That should have made him look at me. It didn't. He just said, 900? That can't be right. It is, and it's tied to Carter and Fields, a closed vendor. Nothing. No surprise. No confusion. Just impatience. "Did you send me the report?" he asked. "This morning. Twice." He finally lowered the phone, but only to rub his forehead like I was giving him a headache. "It's probably a rounding issue," he said. My mouth actually went dry. "A rounding issue?" I repeated. "Andrew, the numbers don't round to $900,000. He chuckled, actually chuckled, and waved at the binder in my hands. "Mark, you stress too much. You're brilliant, but you let the data get into your head. We're closing the quarter. We don't have time to chase ghosts." "Ghosts don't move money," I answered. "That's cute," he said, already picking up his phone again. "Email me a summary. I'll take a look next week." Next week? While someone was siphoning nearly $1 million through his login. "Andrew," I said, "this is serious." He smiled, the way a man smiles when he knows something you don't. "And I'm sure it'll sort itself out." That was the moment I knew he wasn't going to help. Not because he didn't understand, but because he didn't want to. I walked out of his office with the binder still in my hands. I didn't slam the door, didn't make a scene. I just stood in the hallway, feeling a kind of cold I'd never felt at work before. If he wasn't surprised, if he wasn't even curious, then either he was involved or someone very close to him was. That night, I stayed in the office long after the cleaning crew left. I reran every audit trail, printed every approval ID, traced every transaction back to the same destination account. It was a shell entity with no website, no phone, no physical address, just a P.O. box in another state and an account number ending in 0447. It was laundering 40K per week, slow, consistent, invisible. It wasn't amateur work. Someone knew exactly how to hide it. I stared at Andrew's login on the screen. I didn't want to believe it, but believe it or not, the system didn't lie. And at 11:58 p.m., I made a choice that changed the entire story. I sent the full report to one more department, the only one Andrew couldn't intimidate, influence, or charm: IT security. I didn't know it yet, but that decision would cost him everything. It didn't reply that night. They never do. If you've worked in a corporate environment long enough, you know that real investigations start in silence. But the next morning, I could feel something shift the moment I walked into the office. Not loudly, not dramatically, just differently. The air was too still. People typed quieter. A couple of managers were already in at 8 a.m., which never happened unless something was happening behind the scenes. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and found exactly nothing. No emails, no updates, no questions, but the absence of noise was its own answer. At 8:46 a.m., someone from IT security, a guy named Brendan, walked past my desk. He didn't look at me, didn't stop, didn't acknowledge me, but in his hand was a printed stack of papers with a header I recognized from my own report. He walked straight into the glass conference room. Then the blinds closed. That had never happened before. Inside, I saw silhouettes through the blinds. 2 from IT, 1 from accounting, and 1 tall outline I recognized instantly. Andrew. He was pacing, hands flying, gesturing, talking fast. He wasn't calm, he wasn't confused. He looked cornered. I pretended to work, but my eyes kept drifting up to that frosted glass. Every few minutes, someone raised their voice. Not enough to hear, just enough to understand the tone. By 9:12 a.m., the door opened. Andrew stepped out, red in the face. He didn't walk. He stormed. Straight toward my desk. He stopped just short of it, leaned down, and said quietly through clenched teeth, "What did you do?" "I reported a discrepancy," I answered. "You went around me." "I followed policy," I said. He laughed once, a small, sharp sound. "Policy? You sent a $900,000 accusation to IT? Do you have any idea how this makes me look?" "Yes," I said. "Accurate." His jaw tightened so hard I heard his teeth click. "You've crossed a line, Mark." "No," I replied. "The line was crossed when the system showed your login approving false payouts." His eyes went flat, cold, calculating. But then something changed in his expression, something that looked almost like fear. He didn't deny it. He didn't say the obvious sentence any innocent manager would say, "I didn't do it." He just stood there, silent, fighting emotions he couldn't let me see. Then he straightened up and said in a quieter, controlled voice, "You're overestimating your position here." He walked away before I could reply, but I already understood the truth buried in his reaction. He wasn't worried about being falsely accused. He was worried I'd found something real. At 9:14 a.m., I saw Brendan from IT walk quickly out of the conference room with his laptop under his arm. The kind of quick, purposeful walk someone uses when they've just uncovered something they didn't want to find. 10 minutes later, an email popped into my inbox. Subject: access verification. Yeah, it wasn't from Andrew. It was from the IT director. The email was short. "Mark, we may need to validate portions of your analysis. Please be available this afternoon." My pulse slowed, not sped up, because if they were validating my analysis, it meant they'd already validated something else. I printed the email, closed my laptop, and went downstairs for coffee. My hands were steady, but my thoughts weren't. What if Andrew wasn't acting alone? What if the reason he wasn't surprised yesterday was because someone higher up had approved this whole operation? On my way back upstairs, I passed the glass corridor that led to finance. The blinds were still closed. Someone was shouting inside. Not words, just volume. A moment later, the door flung open. Our controller, Marion, stormed out with a face like thunder. She brushed past me, barely acknowledging my existence, her eyes blazing. If she was involved, she was a good actress. But I doubted it. She was territorial about finance integrity. If someone had used her department to launder money, she would have burned the building down. She wasn't guilty. She was angry. And angry people don't hide well. Around 11:20, Andrew finally reappeared. He didn't look like a confident director anymore. He looked like a man who had spent 2 hours trying to explain something that had no explanation. When he saw me, he stopped again. "You think you're the hero here?" he said quietly. "I don't think about it at all," I responded. "I just follow the numbers." He leaned in so close I could smell the coffee on his breath. "You've made a mistake that's going to cost you. And you've made one that's going to cost the company almost $1 million, I replied. For a second his face twisted into something ugly. Then he exhaled, forced a calm smile, and straightened his tie. "Enjoy your 15 minutes, Mark." He walked away, but that wasn't the end. Not even close. At 1:07 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message from someone I barely knew, a junior IT analyst who wasn't supposed to message me during work. He wrote only one sentence. "Check your audit folder. Something new was added." My heart kicked once, because IT doesn't add files to employees' audit folders unless they've discovered something big. I opened my drive. Inside the audit folder was a new file dated that morning. A Cole Nausat1 session log reconstruction.pdf. I clicked it. The first page showed every login session from Andrew's account over the last 90 days. Every unauthorized access. Every payout approval. Every transaction ID. And then, on page 3, something I hadn't seen before. The device fingerprint. It didn't match Andrew's laptop or his desktop. It matched a workstation inside finance, but not his. Someone else had used his credentials. Someone inside our own department. And suddenly the entire fraud looked different. Bigger. Targeted. I stared at the screen, realizing the storm hadn't peaked yet. The worst part was still coming, and someone in that building knew I was the one who had uncovered it. The moment I saw the device fingerprint, something heavy settled in my chest. Not fear, recognition. This wasn't a simple case of one corrupt manager siphoning money. This was someone inside finance, someone who knew our workflows, our blind spots, our approval trees, our system habits. Someone who understood that using Andrew's login gave them protection and plausible deniability. That changed everything. Because if the fraud wasn't coming from Andrew's machine, then IT would start asking a new question. Who benefits from Andrew taking the fall? That question rarely leads to friends. I printed the report and slid it into my binder, the same one Andrew refused to touch. Then I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, trying to slow my mind long enough to think clearly. But clarity didn't come. Something else did. A memory. 2 months earlier, our senior financial analyst, Julia, had asked me how the vendor payout authorizations worked, technically. At the time, I thought she was just curious about system architecture. She liked knowing how things connected. She was smart, detail-oriented, respected. But then I remembered something she'd said. If someone wanted to sneak money out, where would the system be weakest? At the time, I laughed it off. We were standing by the coffee machine. It sounded like a hypothetical. Now it didn't. My stomach tightened. Because the workstation IT flagged? The fingerprint didn't belong to Andrew. It belonged to a machine in the analyst bay. The open floor where Julia and 2 juniors sat. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't ignore it either. At 2:03 p.m., Brendan from IT showed up at my desk. "Meeting conference room B. Now." His voice was flat, professional, body language tight. He wasn't asking. When I walked in, the blinds were half closed. Inside were Brendan, IT security, the IT director, our controller, Marion, and one empty chair, not Andrew's. "Sit," the IT director said. I did. He pulled up the reconstructed session logs on the screen. "Mark, we've verified your report," he said. "Everything you found is accurate." I exhaled once, slow, controlled, but they weren't done. "However," he continued, tapping the screen. These sessions were not initiated from Andrew's device. He clicked again. A workstation ID appeared. Fin 307. My heart dropped. I knew that ID. That was Julia's cubicle row. Marion crossed her arms. Her face was carved out of stone. We're calling in individuals one at a time, she said. Separately. No communication between them. Brendan leaned forward. We need to know who had access to that machine. I swallowed. The workstation is assigned to Julia, I said, but the juniors occasionally use it if they run simulations. It's a shared row. So multiple possibilities, the IT director said. Yes. Marion's eyes narrowed. But only one of them asked you about system vulnerabilities in the past few months, correct? My pulse hit my throat. Julia asked hypothetically, I said carefully. Marion didn't blink. There are no hypotheticals when $900,000 are missing. Before I could respond, the door opened. Julia stepped in, calm, composed, hair tied back, blazer fitted, expression neutral, almost too neutral. She looked at me first. Just a flicker. Not fear, not surprise. Something worse. Recognition. She knew why she was here. She sat in the empty chair, crossed her legs, and folded her hands in her lap. What's going on? She asked. Brendan slid the session log across the table. These approvals came from your workstation. She didn't look at the pages. She looked at me. Mark, she said, you're the one who uses my workstation the most when yours freezes. The statement landed like a slap. Brendan's eyes flicked to me. The IT director looked up sharply. Marion's jaw set, and Julia didn't break eye contact. That was the moment I realized something terrifying. She was willing to burn the entire building down if it kept the flames off her. I kept my voice steady. Yes, sometimes, I said, but never during off hours, and never with Andrew's credentials, and never to approve payouts. Julia tilted her head slightly. Are you sure? It was a subtle attack, but a precise one. She knew exactly how these investigations worked. It needs certainty. Any uncertainty becomes leverage, Brendan interjected. The off-hour logins came from someone physically at the workstation. Keypress verified. We have the keystroke timing. It wasn't Mark. Julia's expression froze for a fraction of a second. A crack in the mask. Marion caught it. Julia, she said sharply. Explain. Julia finally looked at the pages. This looks like a setup, she said quietly. Anyone could have accessed my machine. She wasn't wrong, but it wasn't a defense. It was a pivot. Brendan pressed. Do you lock your workstation when you leave? She hesitated. That was her mistake. Yes, she said. Brendan tapped the report. Not according to the logs. Silence thickened. Then something unexpected happened. Julia's calm cracked. Not into fear, but into irritation. You're all making leaps, she snapped. If someone used Andrew's credentials, it means someone had access to the credential vault. And only directors and controllers have that, not analysts. It was a sharp point, a correct one, and it landed. Marion's eyes hardened. Are you implying Andrew gave someone his login? I'm implying it wasn't me, Julia shot back. Brendan folded his arms. We didn't say it was. She paused, nearly invisible but there, a flinch. Then she stood. I want representation before I answer more. The IT director nodded once. Then this meeting is over. Julia walked out stiffly, but not fast. Not guilty fast. Calculated fast. After the door closed, the room exhaled. Marion turned to me. You did the right thing reporting this, she said, but I need you to understand something. She leaned forward. This isn't just internal fraud anymore. It's coordinated, and whoever's behind it won't go down quietly. I didn't respond, not because I didn't know what to say, but because a realization settled over me like a weight. Reporting the fraud didn't expose Andrew. It exposed the entire structure holding his position up, and someone inside that structure had just tried to throw me under the bus. I walked back to my desk, the hallway suddenly colder than before. People glanced at me, then away. Some whispered, not because they knew the detail, but because they could feel something shifting. At 5:07 p.m., as I packed my bag, my phone buzzed. Block number. A voicemail. I pressed play. A female voice, low, controlled. "You don't know what you've stepped into, Mark. Stop digging." I froze. It wasn't Julia, and for the first time, I understood the scale of what I was actually fighting. This wasn't one person. It was a network, and they had just noticed me. The voicemail sat on my phone like a small, heavy stone. No number. No name. Just that one measured sentence. "You don't know what you've stepped into, Mark. Stop digging." Most people would have saved it as evidence. I replayed it once. Listened to the tone. Calm, controlled. Someone used to giving orders, not begging. Then I did two things. First, I forwarded it, straight to Brendan in IT, and to my personal email. Second, I deleted it from my phone. Not because I was scared, because I was done playing on their terms. If they wanted to intimidate me, they'd pick the wrong week. That night, I wrote everything down. Dates, times, names, exact words Andrew had used, questions Julia asked months ago. Every step from the first suspicious transaction to the last meeting in Conference Room B. I didn't dramatize any of it, just facts. If the situation turned against me, I wanted one thing nobody could take away, a clean timeline. By the time I closed the notebook, it was past midnight. I slept lightly, but not restlessly. The kind of sleep you get when you've already made your choice. I wasn't backing off. The next morning, the building felt different again. Not tense, unstable, like the floor had shifted a few inches and nobody had adjusted yet. At 8:21 a.m., Marion stopped by my desk. "Walk with me," she said. We didn't go to a conference room this time. We went outside, around the side of the building where the smokers huddled on bad days and nobody cared what you said, as long as you kept moving. She didn't smoke. Neither did I. We walked anyway. "I read your original report," she said. "All of it. You're thorough." "Numbers are the easy part," I replied. "People are messier." Her mouth twitched. "You're not wrong." She paused at the corner, staring at the loading dock. "Listen carefully," she continued. "You're going to feel pressure from different directions. HR might call you in. Andrew might try to discredit you. Someone might even suggest you overreached your responsibilities." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She knew I understood. "But here's the part you need to hold on to," Marion added. "You followed policy. You escalated a discrepancy when your direct manager declined to address it. That is exactly what we're supposed to do." "Does the company see it that way?" I asked. She turned, finally looking at me. "The company is not Andrew," she said. "And if he forgets that, he's about to learn." There was a thin, quiet promise in her voice that made the air feel sharper. "Is he the only one?" I asked. She didn't answer that directly. Instead, she said, "I'd finished something last night. At 9:14 a.m., you'll see the first crack." She checked her watch. "You should be at your desk for it." We walked back inside. At 9:10 a.m., my inbox was empty. At 9:13 a.m., my hands were flat on my keyboard, doing nothing. At 9:14 a.m., three things happened almost at once. A mass email hit my inbox. The same notification popped up on the corner of Andrew's screen across the floor. And Marion stepped into the finance bay, arms crossed, watching. Subject: unusual activity. Detected on your account. Immediate action required. The to field showed Andrew Cole. The CC field: Marion, IT Director, HR Director, Legal Controller Distribution List. And everyone in our area could hear the small chime from Andrew's speakers when it landed. I clicked it. So did half the department. The email was brutally simple. "Andrew, our systems have detected multiple high-value transactions authorized from your account outside normal working hours over the past 90 days. Attached is a summary of the reconstructed session logs, including device fingerprints for each session, IP addresses and access locations, transaction IDs and destination accounts. keystroke timing, and physical login verification. Please confirm whether you have personally authorized these transactions. If not, we will proceed under the assumption that your credentials were used without authorization. Regards, IT Security. Below that, highlighted in yellow, was a line that made the whole room go quiet. Please note, all approvals were processed under your unique login, a Cole, as a 1. Andrew turned gray. He opened the attachment. On his screen, I saw the same document I'd read yesterday. Only this time, it was tied explicitly to him, in front of half the management chain. He stood up so fast his chair slammed the wall. "This is insane," he snapped, loud enough for everyone to hear. "There's been a mistake." Marion didn't move. "Then you'll clarify it," she said. "In the meeting. Now." 2 men from IT and 1 from HR were already walking toward him. They didn't touch him. They didn't need to. Here, Andrew looked around the room, scanning faces. He stopped on me. "This is you," he hissed. I didn't get up. "This is the system," I said. "I just read it." Marion's gaze flicked between us, assessing, cataloging. Then she nodded to IT. "Conference room A," she said, and closed the blinds. They escorted him out, not like an arrest, like a problem being contained. As they left, a murmur rippled across the bay. Someone whispered, 900 grand. Someone else said, "I thought that was just a rumor." I turned back to my screen, not because I didn't care, but because I'd done my part. Anything more would turn me from witness to participant, and I wasn't going to give anyone that angle. At 10:02 a.m., my phone rang. Internal extension. HR. "Mark," the HR director said, voice smooth. "We'd like you to join us in conference room C." "Now?" I asked. "Yes. Bring any documentation you've compiled about the vendor discrepancies." They didn't have to tell me who was already in the room. I could feel it. When I walked in, 3 people were waiting. HR director, legal counsel, Brendan from IT No Andrew. No Julia. That alone told me the situation had escalated beyond departmental politics. "Mark," legal began, "we want to make sure we understand your role in this." "I sent a discrepancy report to my manager," I said. "He dismissed it without review. I escalated to IT per policy when I realized the amount and the pattern." "Do you have that policy in writing?" HR asked. I pulled a printed page from my folder. "Section 4.2.3 of the Financial Controls Manual," I said. I highlighted it. Legal read it, lips moving silently. "Did anyone instruct you not to escalate?" she asked. "No," I answered, but my manager strongly implied it was unnecessary. His exact words were, "We don't have time to chase ghosts." Brendan chimed in, "Your timeline matches our logs. Your system activity is consistent with analysis, not initiation." HR looked up. "We're also aware you received a voicemail yesterday, threatening in nature." I met Brendan's eyes. He gave a tiny nod. "I forwarded it to IT," I said. "I can attest it wasn't from any number associated with my contacts." "Do you recognize the voice?" Legal asked. "No," I said. "But it wasn't Julia's, and it wasn't Andrew's." Legal sat back. "Mark, I need to be very clear with you. You are considered a key witness in an active internal investigation. You are not under suspicion." The words landed like a small, solid weight in my chest. Not relief, not victory, just ground. "If that status changes," I said, "I'd like to know immediately." "It won't," HR replied. "You've documented your steps meticulously, frankly, more than most." They asked more questions. Precise, technical, no fishing expeditions, no traps. When the meeting ended, legal stood. "One more thing," she added. "If anyone approaches you and suggests you drop it, let it go or stop digging, please report it immediately, in writing." I thought of the voicemail. "I already have," I said. For the first time that week, I saw something like approval in her expression. "Good. Keep doing exactly that." When I walked back to my desk, the finance floor was split down the middle. half pretending to work, half pretending not to speculate. Julia wasn't at her workstation. Her screen was locked, her chair pushed in. At 11:46 a.m., a company-wide notification popped up. Certain user accounts have been temporarily suspended as part of an internal security review. If you experience issues accessing systems, contact IT. Nobody needed names. We all knew. I sat down, opened a blank document, and added one last line to my timeline. 9:14 a.m. It sent Andrew the evidence with his own login in the subject line, and half the leadership team watching. For the first time since this started, I allowed myself a small, quiet thought. They wanted me to stop digging. Instead, the ground just gave way beneath them. By the next morning, the building finally sounded honest. No forced laughter. No casual hallway jokes to pretend nothing was happening. Just quiet. The kind that fills a place when a lie collapses, and people suddenly hear how loud it always was. I arrived at 8:04 a.m., sharp, logged in, opened my inbox. 2 emails were waiting. The first was short. Mark, please be available at 10 a.m. Conference room A. Marion. The second came from IT. Your testimony may be required for sequence of events verification. I exhaled slowly, not nervous, not triumphant, just steady. At 9:14 a.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Brendan. They're moving him. I looked up. Across the bay, 2 members of corporate security, not guards, just internal security, were walking Andrew toward the elevators. No handcuffs, no scene, just quiet steps, and a man whose confidence had evaporated in less than 24 hours. He didn't look at anyone. He didn't need to. Everyone already knew. The elevator doors closed, and the room exhaled as one. I closed my laptop and headed to conference room A. Inside were Marion, the CFO, legal, IT director, HR director, and one empty seat waiting at the end of the table. Marion nodded. Sit, Mark. The CFO spoke first, a woman who rarely raised her voice and never wasted time. We're going to walk you through what we've uncovered. We want you to hear the whole picture. She tapped the tablet in front of her. As of this morning, Andrew has been suspended pending official termination. Legal is preparing the full case. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt confirmation, like the numbers had finally spoken in a room full of people who could no longer ignore them. The IT director folded his hands. The shell account you traced, the one ending in 0447, is tied to a private LLC created 18 months ago. It was inactive until 9 months ago, when the first unauthorized payout went through. He continued, We've traced the login device fingerprint to a workstation used regularly by Julia. Additionally, system access logs show repeated credential requests originating from her session token. Marion added, and the kicker, the credential vault shows an authorization request for Andrew's login at 6:12 p.m. 6 months ago. Approved manually. The approval came from an admin-level account used only during onboarding. The CFO turned to legal. Explain it. Legal didn't sugarcoat it. This wasn't Andrew alone, she said. This was collusion. Julia accessed Andrew's credentials using an onboarding loophole. Andrew either looked the other way or received compensation for his silence. So Julia was running the transactions, I said quietly, and Andrew shielded her. Correct, legal replied. She had the technical skill. He had the authority and the access. Together, they built a funnel. And the voicemail? I asked. HR answered. We traced the call, burner app, but we're not pursuing it. You forwarded it, documented it, and it strengthens your position as a cooperating witness. The CFO leaned forward. Mark, you uncovered this. You escalated it correctly. You protected yourself, and by extension, the company. Then for the first time in my entire career, a C-level executive said words I'd never expected to hear. You did exemplary work. I didn't know what to say. My instinct was to deflect, to say I was just doing my job. But that wasn't the truth. I'd gone beyond the job description. I had stuck my neck out, and I hadn't backed down when someone tried to push me off the trail. So I said the only honest thing. "You're welcome." The CFO nodded once, satisfied. "We're not finished," she said. "Julia was confronted this morning. She attempted to deny involvement, but when presented with login timestamps, keystroke verification, and vault access records, she requested legal counsel." I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just listened. Marion spoke again. "We're reassigning responsibilities. We'd like you to take over Andrew's interim duties while we complete the restructuring." That landed heavier than everything else. "Interim?" I repeated. "Yes," the CFO said. "Assuming performance and interest align, it may become permanent." A slow realization washed over me. Not excitement, not pride. Clarity. Everything that had happened wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about bringing people down. It was about removing obstacles, fraud, intimidation, threats. They were smokescreens for people who didn't belong in positions of trust. Once they were gone, the path wasn't suddenly easy, but it was visible. Marion closed her folder. "One last thing, Mark," she said. "You said yesterday that numbers don't lie. People do." She offered a thin smile. "Turns out you were right about both." Legal stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "You'll receive documentation to sign. You are not under investigation. You are protected. And you have our thanks." I walked out of the conference room feeling lighter than I had in weeks, but not triumphant. Just grounded, balanced, like the noise in my life finally matched the noise in my head. When I reached the finance bay, people looked at me differently, not like a hero. I didn't want that, but with a kind of quiet respect normally reserved for people who stay calm in fires. Julia's desk was empty, her monitors dark, her chair still. Andrew's office door was closed, locked, badge access disabled. At 12:14 p.m., a final company-wide email landed. "Andrew Cole and Julia Rivers are no longer with the company effective immediately. All responsibilities have been reassigned pending restructuring." No explanation, no euphemisms, just truth. By 3 p.m., IT pushed a patch that closed the onboarding credential loophole permanently. By 4 p.m., finance updated the vendor payout controls. By the end of the week, the Shell LLC's assets were frozen. They wouldn't recover the entire 920 Kitas. Fraud never returns a perfect refund. But the leak was closed, the damage contained, and the people responsible gone. I walked out of the building at 5:02 p.m. The sun still over the parking lot, the air cool and clean. I didn't check my phone. I didn't replay anything in my head. I just unlocked my car, sat behind the wheel, and let myself feel the first real quiet I'd had in months. Not victory, not relief, just peace. The absence of chaos. Corporate stories rarely end neatly. People get away with things. Truth gets buried. Good work gets ignored. But this time, the system didn't save them. It saved the truth. And at 9:14 a.m. that morning, when IT sent Andrew the evidence with his own login in the subject line, that was the moment the system finally spoke louder than the lies. I didn't ruin anyone. I just read the numbers. And the numbers were enough.